Hey, thank y'all for stopping by the coffee shop over here today. And what are we talking about? Cast iron, the best creation ever invented to cook with. I don't care if you're inside, outside, it is so good, it is. And hey, not only are we talking about cast iron, but I am bringing in an expert, a friend of mine, Peter Huntley, the CEO and the founder of Stargazer Cast Iron. So, hey, you folks get to dreaming up your questions. Everything's going to be good. But hey, y'all seen me use that product, and it is, hey, one of the things that just naturally fit my hand. And they clean well, they season well, and they accept it. And I'm just proud to have them. And you need to be sure that you stick around for a special discount here and some exciting news we're going to have about some new product right there at the end. So don't be running off and leaving us halfway through thinking you got to go check the football game score, because this is more important. Cast iron in the kitchen or cast iron outside, we got to take care of it. So, Peter, we thank you, sir, so much for stopping by and taking time out of your busy day to be with us, brother.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Kent, for having me, and I'm excited to be here and answering questions from the people. I thought I could start by covering a couple of the sort of top questions we get, and popular misconceptions or things that people just don't understand about cast iron, and just kind of kick it off with the basics and see where we're at.
Yes, sir.
So obviously, seasoning is the big thing, right? Everyone's always asking about, what do I season with? How do I clean the seasoning? Can I cook this? Is this good for the seasoning? Is this bad for the seasoning? So if we could start just defining seasoning. Seasoning is the layer of fat or oil that's applied to the cast iron. And once it polymerizes, and that's just a fancy word for going from liquid to solid, that's your seasoning. So it's sort of the oil, when it cooks off, it turns into a hard shell, a protective coating on that iron, and it's gonna help it cook the way it's supposed to cook. It's gonna help it release that food because it's sort of a buffer between the iron and the food, and it's gonna protect the iron itself. It's gonna keep it free of rust and the elements and that kind of thing. So it's good for the iron. It's good for cooking, and it's something that should be maintained and taken care of. But at the same time, we like to kind of reassure people that seasoning is renewable. It's going to come and go depending what you're cooking, and that's a natural part of cooking with cast iron, and
Hey,
people shouldn't
Peter,
stress too much about it. Yes.
I'm going to jump in because we got a question from
Great.
Moonlit, and they
Yep.
asked when they're seasoning with a rag, they get a little black residue after seasoning on the rag. Is that okay?
A little black residue on the rag itself is fine. I mean, that happens sometimes, particularly if there's not a lot of seasoning on the skillet and you're adding to like a pretty new skillet. You'll see some residue coming off on the cloth or whatever you're using to apply it, and that's totally normal. It's nothing to worry about. People will, we occasionally get people that are concerned about discoloration or that type of thing. We like to reassure them that it's just iron. In the event that some of it's coming off or it's touching your food or any of this type of thing, the iron's not going to hurt you. It's not, there's no toxic chemicals or anything in there. It's just iron. So it's really nothing to worry about. And we like to, reassure people, that kind of thing. I think we say, when in doubt, just keep cooking. That 95% of the time, the solution to your problem is just keep cooking with it. Just keep developing that seasoning, and it generally sorts itself out.
Yep.
Um, I'm going to jump right into truck metal, and we've gotten a lot of questions about this. What's a quick and easy way to remove rust from cast iron?
Well, from my end of it anyway, it's
Yeah.
going to be a salt scrub that I start with. After I get anything out of it that's left in there residue wise, and then we're going to heat that thing up just a little to where it's warm enough for the touch, and I'm probably going to use a little salt and a little oil so I have a little lubricant there with it, and then give it a good rinsing with hot water, set it on a heat surface to dry it out and see where we're at. And if things are really, really rusty, if I find a lot of old pieces and stuff I've been digging around for, I'll give them some vinegar and some baking soda or just a straight vinegar bath.
That's perfect. That's exactly. We're on the same page. I think you always start by trying to scrub it off before you get into any sort of chemicals or anything like that. And if it's really deep that you can't get through it, I would switch to vinegar at that point. So
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, they see a little dab of rust and think that can't hurt, and you can seize it over. You can change the color of it, but it's still under there. And food's going to stick. If it has a chance to stick anywhere, it's going to be on those rusty spots, and it's just not clean. Cast iron is the healthiest thing that you can eat out of. And let's just keep it clean, keep it seasoned, and it'll be good.
Cynthia wants to know, why does her cast iron, when she cooks in it, her food tastes like iron?
Okay,
What-
yeah, I can jump in on that one. So the iron, so it depends a lot. There's a couple variables here. First of all, it's nothing to worry about. It's not you don't have a defective skillet or anything like that. It's something that can happen. And it depends how much seasoning is built up on that surface, how much of a buffer you have in between the food and the iron, and also how acidic the food is that you're cooking in it. So if you don't have a lot of seasoning there, if there's not a lot of buffer, and if you're cooking something very acidic, it can pull some of that iron into the food. Like I said, it's nothing to worry about. It's not going to hurt you, so you don't have to, it's not a concern on that front. Obviously, it's something you want to avoid by building up enough layers of seasoning that you have a good buffer there.
That is right. Another question, Shannon?
Marty wants to know, should he be concerned about lead in his cast iron?
Well, in the cast iron that Peter and them are making, no. Some of the old antique pieces that you find at old swap meets, junk stores, stuff like that, especially the littler size they are. Now, a lot of them things were used to melt lead to make bullets, primitive firearm stuff like that, or weights for trot lines. So I always tell people, if you don't really know, a lead checker is cheap. You can get one off Amazon and do that, but just be careful and just start out with something that's good. It's just going to get better.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah, if there's any doubt on a vintage piece, a lead checker is a good thing to do, just to be sure.
It is.
You guys, before we jumped on, had been talking about this. How do you feel? Ben wants to know, what about chainmail scrubbers?
Go ahead, Peter, and then I'll put my 2 cents worth in there.
Okay, so we tell people it's okay to use a chainmail scrubber. You're not going to hurt your skillet by doing it. I think most of the time, for most of your everyday cooking, even a chainmail scrubber is going to be overkill. I'd rather have you use the chainmail scrubber than like a Brillo pad or steel wool or something like that. But I think like 90% of the time, part of my set's falling down behind me, excuse me. I was going to say 90% of the time, a stiff brush or a salt scrub or something like that is going to be more than enough to loosen up any food that's in there. And it's really, you want to do just enough to get the food out. You don't want to go scrubbing like crazy.
Yeah. And it's best if you can clean this when you get through cooking with it. Don't let it set 30 minutes, anything else. It's going to clean fastest right then. And, I never was one to put anything that was really harmful, I thought, to my cast iron. And that's one of the reasons we made them mesquite spatulas so many years ago, because wood to iron isn't going to hurt that seasoning.
Ralph wants to know, do you have any tips for long-term storage for cast iron?
Long-term storage. Well, that depends too on where you live. What is the weather there? If you're live in a really humid place, I always tell people, if you're going to store it very long and it's got something that's got a lid on it, dump you a cup of minute rice in there. It's going to get any moisture that might come along before anything takes effect. And if you don't have that, get you some of that used hardwood lump that you got out there, that you got out of the charcoal grill. Because just like odor eaters, that charcoal in there is going to eat up any odor that might ever come along, but it's also going to absorb moisture. But I like to store them. If I'm going to do that a long period of time, you got to give them a vapor barrier to where you have an airflow. You have to take a piece of newspaper, fold it up, put it between the lid and the oven itself or the skillet. That way you've got some kind of a wick to transfer air back and forth.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to say, generally, you just want to make sure it can breathe. You don't want it sealed in any kind of container or something. You want to make sure that the moisture can get out. You don't want it trapped in there.
Rob wants to know, are there certain foods that you should not cook in cast iron?
There is, for sure, and I'll put mine little 2 cents worth in there, and then I'll let Peter go ahead and explain why. Acidic food is hard on seasoning. Whether it be a fruit acid, a tomato base, barbecue, something like that, it's going to eat at your seasoning. Now, this old stuff that I have is back in the 70s, is polished well. I mean, you can see yourself in it. Do I cook with them things? Yes, but I don't recommend anybody using this in a oven or a skillet that is fairly new because you're just eating away at your seasoning. Is that about right, Peter?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I mean, the acids are really the problem, particularly in new cast iron as you're developing the seasoning. Um, so yeah, we tell people that cast iron really shines. It's really at its best when it's something that's cooked in a fat or a butter or something like that. If you're searing meats or you're doing some kind of baking or something like that, that to me is that's the sweet spot for cast iron.
Yeah.
You can cook plenty of other things in it, but generally, particularly things that are simmering in acid for a period of time, if it's like simmering in a wine sauce or a tomato sauce, that's something to avoid, particularly on a new piece while you're building it up.
Yeah. And I tell folks one of the best things that I've found that you can do to a new piece of cast iron when you start out with it after you go in is to deep fry it. Because when you're deep frying with a piece of cast iron, your oil's staying at a constant temperature of at least 350 degrees most of the time, and your cast iron is saying, "Thank you so much. I needed that." So, you got a new one?
Yeah,
Hey, deep fry some taters into something.
sounds good to
So
me.
Mike Howell is asking about soap. He says he's never used soap. He's heard it's bad on cast iron, but now has heard that modern soaps aren't as harsh. So what's your feeling on soap?
Well, Mike, for years and years, that's all I ever heard. You can't put any soap in a piece of cast iron. And back then, a lot of times when my mother was telling me that old soap was harsh, it was lye soap. It was something that was really hard on cast iron. Do I use soap? Maybe once in a blue moon. I still don't like to think that I'm going to put it back in there, but I don't think it's as harsh as it used to be. I just clean mine with hot water, and then it's good to go. Set back on there, dry it out, re-season it, and you're good. You're good to go in my book.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we tell people if you're more comfortable using soap, it's fine. If you're using a gentle dish soap, a Dawn or something like that, one of those a modern dish soap, it's really not. It's not going to hurt anything. I don't think it's necessary. We always tell people hot water and a stiff brush is all you're going to need most of the time. But like I was saying about the oil polymerizing, the dish soap will take off liquid oil very quickly. I mean, that's really what it does best is it breaks down that liquid oil. Once it polymerizes and forms that hard shell on the surface, it's pretty tough. You're not gonna damage it immediately by putting some dish soap in there. So I
Yep.
wouldn't worry too much about it.
Peter, a question that I get a lot of times on the road when we're doing demos or stuff like this, and people always ask me, they'll say, okay, the old stuff, the Griswold, the Wagners, the finish that it had on it, what is the difference today? So could you tell us the difference between rough and machined and a polished hand finish?
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. So I actually have a couple samples here that I can explain kind of how the process works and how different people do it and that type of thing. So let me just start by explaining that the way that Stargazer casts them and the way that most of the major players in the space are casting them and the way they made them back in the day too with the Wagners and the Griswolds is called green sand casting. And how that works is you're taking what's called a pattern. I don't know how well you can see it in the corner of my office here, the sort of metal plate with the skillet on it. You're taking that and you're pressing it into a bed of wet sand and clay. And if you picture the way that when you make a sand castle, you wet the sand and it holds its shape, it's the same idea. You're pressing this into the sand, you take it out, and now you've got the shape of a skillet stamped into the sand, and you're filling that with molten iron, and that's your skillet there. When you shake the sand off, you got the shape of a skillet. You got your casting. So if you can imagine the surface finish coming out of that sand, it's got the grittiness of the sand on the surface. And then the big differences between all the cast iron on the market and the vintage stuff and the new stuff is really what you're doing after it comes out of that sand. So I got a couple pieces here. This is actually a Stargazer right when it comes out of the sand. And you can see it's got this matte sort of grainy finish to it. And you can see that the surface is quite a bit thicker as well. You can see it's actually raised up over the handles. If I show you from the side, this is heavy here because we're casting it thick and it's very rough. And then what we do is we take it to a machine we're using a lathe, and we're cutting away that inside surface. And you can see it's thinner now, and it's very shiny. It almost looks like stainless steel when it's right off the machine. And then what we do here is a number of other steps to that shiny surface. And once you apply that seasoning, you end up with this. And we call this micro textured, but it's sort of a satin. It's sort of not super shiny, but it's smooth. And we find it holds the seasoning well, and it also it releases the food well. And that's really the balance you're trying to find, is you want it to hold the seasoning, but easily release the food.
Yeah.
Now, the vintage stuff, they were doing that by hand. So I showed you this piece here that we're cutting on a precision machine. Back in the day, they would have been grinding them down manually, and you would have seen, piece to piece, you can see kind of the variations of who was running the machine that day and that type of thing. They have a little more character to them. Today, we're able to get a much more precise cut on that. But whether you're, and then the differences from there is just about the terms that the different brands use. Some guys call it polish, some guys call it machine, some guys call it, whatever smooth type of finish. It's just a question of what they're doing after that casting that's giving it the final finish.
Thank you, brother.
We're getting a lot of questions about, is there a particular temperature that's ideal for seasoning cast iron?
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I'd say it. The perfect temperature actually depends what kind of oil or what kind of fat you're using to season, because the higher the smoke point of the oil, the higher you have to heat it. So in-house, we use a blend of canola, grapeseed, and sunflower oil, and those are all high smoke point oils. So we heat it up to around 475 degrees. But I'd say somewhere in that 450 to 500 range is going to be hot enough to polymerize just about any oil that you're using.
I've always used grapeseed oil for years and years, and I've started using some avocado now, and I sort of like it. But I probably don't run that hot on a lot of mine. I'll run 400 most of the time to start out with. But all my old stuff still just sees pure olive oil.
We've got a question from our good buddy Davish Lambert.
Oh, my friend in Canadian Texas.
And he wants to know, how can you easily get rid of flaking and then start over?
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, if the seasoning's flaking off, this is a question we get pretty often too. I never recommend that someone totally strip a skillet. I mean, some people, they say, how can I just strip it all the way down and start over? If your seasoning is in generally good shape, but it's got a couple spots that are, kind of loosening up, or just some bare spots that have revealed themselves, we tell people scrub away the loose stuff, kind of scrape it away and scrub it with something a little bit abrasive to anything that's loose. You can lift it off, and then just apply your fresh seasoning over that, over the scrubbed area. I find that, people want to get in there and they want to strip it all away, and 9 times out of 10, that's overkill. So I'd say just get off the loose stuff and rebuild from there.
Tim Miller would like to know, when he cooks, it smokes, his cast iron smokes a lot. Do you have any tips for reducing that in the house?
Go ahead, Peter. I'm gonna work you.
The smoke is probably, well, I guess it depends. I wonder if the cookware itself is smoking, or if it's the thing that he's cooking that's smoking. I mean, in general, if you're seeing smoke, it just means you've heated the oil past its smoke point. So I'd say if he wants to keep using the same temperature that he's been using, if he wants to get it good and, really ripping hot, he should switch to an oil with a higher smoke point, something like a grapeseed or sunflower oil or something, as opposed to an olive oil, which is a little bit of a lower temperature oil.
Yeah, because when it's that hot and you're smoking, especially if you're smoking the oil, you done lost it. You're not gaining anything by it.
Yeah.
Peter wants to know, is it okay to season the same pan with different oils?
Well, a lot of times, Peter, when we start out, we may start out with avocado oil or grapeseed and then switch back and forth either one. But the initial base coatings that I like to put on something, I try to use the same oil to get everything started to build that great foundation.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm pretty loosey goosey as far as type of oil used. I know people get very concerned about which oil to use, and I stress that the way that you apply it is more important than the type of oil you're using. You want to make sure you're getting it on there in really thin coats. You don't want to glob it on, and then you want to make sure you're heating it hot enough and long enough that you're polymerizing it, that it's really setting on there.
Yes, ma'am, Shan?
Big Red Man wants to know if Stargazer has lids for their cast iron skillets.
They are actively in development. Actually, you can see right behind me here is a 3D printer. This is actually a 3D print of our lid, the design that we got worked up. And so these are actively in development now. So you can keep an eye out and expect those coming to market in the near future.
There we go.
We get a lot of questions about what's the easiest way to clean cast iron and how often.
The easiest way to clean that cast iron is like we said before, right at the first. Do it when you get finished cooking with it. Now, if you've got excess oil in there or something like that, sure, wipe all that out, all the residue you can. I try to keep some hot water on the stove, and because to me, hot water makes steam. Steam makes things clean, and you can put it right back over there. Maybe use that wooden spatula just a minute if there's anything that's loose. But a well-seasoned skillet is so easy to clean and doesn't take any time at all.
Yeah, that's perfect. Once the iron fully cools, I'll find it gets a little crustier. The stuff, the food in there gets a little more stubborn. So
Yeah.
if you can do it while the skillet's still warm, it's going to be much easier for you.
Jason Webb wants to know, well, then how often are you supposed to season your skillet?
Well, Jason, I tell people I season my skillets or my Dutch ovens every time I use them. If it's once a day, twice a day, 3 times a day, it always gets cleaned, always gets dried, always gets heated, and always gets seasoned. That's what's going to give you that mirror finish that everybody looks for. The more I can use a piece of cast iron, the better it's going to get.
Great.
We had a question before on our Facebook page about seasoning the lid of a Dutch oven. Are you supposed to do that?
When anything that's on the inside of a piece of cast iron, whether it's the bottom, the sides, or underneath the lid of a true Dutch oven, they get seasoned. Because when you have a lid on something, you're creating moisture there first that's going to come to the top and stick on that. And if you don't season that, and when it dries, then you're going to end up with that dreaded disease that cast iron hates more than anything else, and that is rust. So always clean them and season them just like they are the inside of the skillet or the oven itself. Now you can season the outside of one. I just use any cheap vegetable oil on the outside, but always make sure that you clean underneath that lid.
Yeah, I'll actually add on to that to say, on the Stargazer website, our sort of official recommendations on this type of thing, we actually describe 2 sort of approaches to seasoning, what we call a maintenance seasoning and what we call a full seasoning. And maintenance seasoning is just what we call it when you're hitting basically just the cooking surface. After cleaning, you're giving it some fresh oil in the cooking surface and you're warming it back up, and that's sort of your daily, everyday kind of seasoning. And then full seasoning is something you do just sporadically. Maybe it's every few months or something, where you're giving it the handle and the bottom and sort of that full coating and making sure that you're protecting the outside as well. So at the end of the day, you want to make sure that every part of it is seasoned, but you don't have to worry so much about the outside. That's sort of just an every once in a while kind of thing.
Mike R wants to know, can seasoning go rancid?
Yes, Mike, if for years and years, and even when I was growing up, everybody that used cast iron seasoned with lard or bacon grease, something like that. And if you're using it every day, my mother sat on the burner every day, never got moved. They were always there. She seasoned with lard. It had a glass finish to it. But if you ever store any of those things, whether it's been seasoned with bacon grease or lard, something like that, over time it is going to get rancid because there's no air getting to that and it's not getting used. But with the good quality oils like they have today, the grapeseed and stuff like that, I've never had a problem with it.
Yeah, I agree. I've never seen that happen, but like we said, if it is really long-term storage, you want to make sure that you're giving it room to breathe and putting, space in between things and that type of thing, that you're not having any trapped moisture or that type of thing, because it's, you're more likely to have trouble with it.
Cook's question, Peter, for me that I get a lot of time that people are asking me, okay, I want to braise a piece of meat. I really want it to get really hot. The way I do mine is I'll preheat a piece of iron in the oven and then take it out, slap it on a burner. Is that what y'all recommend?
Yeah, I think that's great. The nice thing about that is, in the oven, you're getting totally even heat. And particularly on a big piece of cast iron, if it's not preheated long enough or the burner's too small, you can get that kind of hot spot towards the middle. And when you got it going in the oven, it's totally uniform, and you're getting that good even sear on it. So I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, and I always tell people too, cast iron is it's the friendliest thing you got in the whole world in your kitchen, but treat it accordingly. I always warm cast iron before I ever start to heat it to any extent. I don't
Yep.
really like to shock a piece of iron from one way or the other. So even in the house of a morning, everything starts on low heat and then gets to going after that. But cast iron will save you money in that way too because there is great heat retention.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip, and that's something that we're always telling people is that you want to preheat it for plenty of time on low heat, and it gives a chance for the whole piece to warm up and the heat to kind of even out and dissipate. And that's going to give you better cooking performance, and it's better for the life of the iron too, because
Right?
you're not shocking it.
Yep.
We've had several people ask about broken cast iron and if it can be fixed and how.
Well, I've had some old pieces that have fell off the trailer or I've dropped and knocked a handle off of them, and I've had them fixed. I haven't had any fix that's on the inside surface of the flat part of the skillet or the Dutch oven, but I have had some of the handles and stuff like that put back on. What would y'all recommend, Peter?
It's tough. I mean, it's cast iron is difficult to weld back together once it's been cracked. If it's in the cooking surface, I'd say unfortunately there's not a great option that I found for how to repair that and have it be a smooth, nice
Yeah,
surface again. So when I find pieces like that, we recycle them, we melt them back down, and we make new skillets out of them.
there you go. Another question, Shen?
Yeah, kind of the same line. Robin says her skillet wobbles. Is there anything she can do about that?
Well, Robin, a lot of time if a skillet
Yeah.
wobbles, it's probably got too hot and warped at some point or the other, and people, I get that question a lot. You can set it on a table and spin the handle all the way around, and they say, hey, it's hard to keep on the burner, it don't fry right. But them things still make the greatest baking dish that you'll find because it will set still in an oven. As far as fixing them, years ago I did fix a few, but I cracked a few too. So warping is usually due to it got too hot in a hurry, and some of the old stoves did that. That's why some of the old antique iron had a heat ring on it that sort of give it a little barrier in between such great heat that it's got. But y'all got anything else that y'all would do to that, Peter?
No, yeah, unfortunately, it's again very difficult to repair that. That's actually the primary reason for failure of cast iron that we see is that warping of the bottom
Yeah,
because it warps. There's a little bit of flex that's normal while you're cooking. We'll see some pieces, as they're preheating, they'll flex a little bit, and then it normalizes once the heat evens out. But it gets past a certain point, and it never goes back.
yeah,
We've tried to reform them, reshape them, and I found, like I said, once it's past a certain point, you're more likely to crack it than you are
yeah.
to have it go back again. So that's another reason to preheat on low heat and make sure you're using a burner that's big enough for the piece. Because we tell people if it warps, it was, too hot, too fast, or the burner too small type thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they were a lot of the problems that I've seen with that were the old electric coal burners that people used so many years
Right.
ago, because the heat center was more in one spot than it was anywhere else. So good point about make sure your heat surface is big enough that it'll heat your piece of iron.
Yep.
I'm just going to pop in because we've been getting a lot of recent questions about rust care. So I just want to invite everybody to check out the video after we go live. You can review it. And we did talk about rust
Yeah.
care. But I've got a question from Aaron. He says, why is my seasoning or my cast iron bronze or sepia toned as I've been seasoning and building it back up after restoring it?
Well, I always tell people, hey, when you first start out with a piece of new iron and you start seasoning it, you're not going to get that automatic glossy black finish the first time. I've seen it speckled colored from bronze to black to still a little grayish color of raw iron. and it's not going to happen overnight. But don't give up on it. It's going to get there. Just keep treating it the way you're supposed to. Clean it well, dry it well, heat it, and season it.
Yep. Yeah, we get a lot of questions about color because our skillet is sort of this copper brown kind of color you can see here. This is actually 2 coats of seasoning, and that's how it looks. You know, when it first comes out, it's gray like this. So this is without any seasoning, and then it's sort of a brown color in the beginning, and as it gets used and developed, it'll get down to that, black or almost black, pretty dark.
Yeah.
Scarlene wants to know, can you use cast iron on glass top stoves?
I tell people you can use cast iron on any heat surface in the world, and you can sure use it on a glass cooktop as long as it doesn't have a heat ring on it. And most of the new pieces don't. You just can't be, as I tell people, you can't slam it down on there and say, let's get to cooking. But I've known people that have used it on induction, everything else from glass cooktops, from the later models till the brand new ones, and it works fine.
Yeah, we tell people it's, again, safe for everything. You just don't want to be slamming it down or dragging it around, or just be gentle with it.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the Stargazer cast iron name, Peter?
Oh, I love astronomy. So yeah, I wanted something that was personal. The other thing too, actually, here you see a little spaceship on my desk here. Yeah, I wanted something that was personal and something I was interested in, and I also wanted something with sort of an iconic look to it, and I wanted some, recognizable. And I loved the star. You can see, the top of our handles have that star stamped in, and I wanted something like that, a simple symbol that we could print in the iron, and that people would be able to see it and know who made it. And so Stargazer, and we got the star there, and that's how we got there.
Well, this might be a perfect opportunity.
Hey.
You've got an exciting announcement,
That's
Kent.
right.
I'm gonna hand
Now,
that to you.
they have just come out with this product, and I want you to look at this. This is what I fell in love with automatically when I first seen it, the 2 handles. You can put this anywhere in the world, take it with you. And folks, it's not as heavy as you might think it is. I think Peter said around 7 pounds, but the construction, the way this thing is made, this is what we would call a braising skillet. But I could fill this thing full of bread pudding with whiskey cream sauce, and me and the Beagle could eat for quite some time. So, Peter, this is a great looking piece of iron. It is, my friend.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we've been working on this for a long time. I mean, ever since from the beginning when we first started the company, everyone's like, when are you going to come out with something big? I want a 14-inch, I want a whatever. So we've been working on this for a while, I think about 2 years, and we're so excited to finally announce it. We're just taking pre-orders for it now, and then we're starting production in the new year. And yeah, I think people are really going to like this.
Well, I know you're doing that pre-order, but the good folks of Peter and them and everybody at Stargazer, they're helping you out. Hey, it's shopping time. It is. The holidays are coming up, and it don't have to be a holiday to own one of these skillets. It'll be the best day you got. They are offering a 15% code, which starts 11/24. That's
it starts now.
Starts now through the 24th of November. Yes. And when you place that order, just type in that code, and what do you think it might be? Cowboy. That will get you right there to it, and you'll get 15% off your order. And folks, it's a great piece of iron, lasts forever.
And Peter, this is for anything purchased on Stargazer cast iron, correct?
Yep, you got it. Yeah, just it applies to the whole order for whatever you're getting.
Yeah. So it's one of them deals to where, hey, this makes a great gift, but I tell people cast iron is an investment. It's something that's you pay for once, but it's going to last you a lifetime if you take care of it. And it gives you something back every time you use it. You'll never have to go out and buy another one to replace this one if you'll take care of it. It is the best thing ever to cook with, cast iron. So, Peter, we sure do thank you for taking time out of your day, like I say. And folks, I tell you, you need to just go over there and follow Stargazer on Instagram and Facebook, and you can pre-order the Brazier now with the code of any of their products that you need. And we so much appreciate each one of you tuning in and the questions that we've got. And
Peter, where's the best place for people to follow cast iron or follow Stargazer cast iron?
I'd say Instagram and Facebook are kind of our main platforms. We're active on both of those.
All right.
And the handle is just Stargazer Cast Iron.
All right. Well, Peter, like I say, we thank you so much, my friend. We hope y'all have a blessed Thanksgiving, and everything that comes to the table comes in cast iron. So
Thank you, Ken.
we
Great to be here.
appreciate it. Thank all you viewers for dropping in. We hope you have a blessed day, and just be safe and be kind to your neighbor.